Hey guys, this is Adam Blackstar, and I wanted to make a video talking to those of you out there who have recently become unbelievers. Or perhaps you're someone who suspects that you are on the road that will end with unbelief, non-belief. I've been an atheist for about a year now, so I still recall pretty vividly what that was like, that moment when the light came on and everything suddenly made sense. But I remember that what I really wanted at that moment was I wanted to know that there were people out there like me, having the same experience as I was. Even though it felt like it was such an amazing uh, experience that I thought, surely I'm the only one that's gone through this. Well, as it turned out, there were so many people out there who had pretty much the exact same thing happen to them. So you're not alone. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about different reasons for becoming an atheist. There's really a good reason, one legitimate reason, and there's several bad reasons. Now, people who become atheists for emotional reasons, I don't find their stories very compelling. I've known of some people who became an atheist because something bad happened to them. Maybe they had a bad experience at church. Maybe there was a tragedy in their life that caused them to rebel against their religious teachings. Maybe they just decided that being an atheist was kind of an edgy direction to go. I don't find the stories of those people to be very compelling. And the reason is because emotion is really what religious belief is built on. So if emotion can bring you to religious belief, then emotion can bring you out of religious belief, and then it can bring you back to religious belief. When you're led by emotion, what I'm trying to say is you don't really have a compass. You don't really have a good reason for doing something. You're pretty much just, you're not in control of yourself, basically. You are being driven. And the people, those types of atheists tend to be the ones who write books about how I was an atheist, and then I was born again. I was converted from my atheism to Christianity, and now here's a tell-all about what convinced me. And it's usually some silly apologist argument which has been debunked thousands of times. So these are not good reasons to become an atheist. What is a good reason to become an atheist? Chances are, if you're watching this video, if you're actually interested in other people's thoughts on this matter, then chances are you have become an atheist for the right reason. And there's really only one legitimate reason, and that is that you stopped believing it, or that you rejected the claim. You assessed the claim, you found out that it has insufficient evidence, and you've set it aside, and you've said, I will not believe that, I cannot believe that, based on insufficient evidence. That makes you an atheist. It's not a choice. You never make a choice. You don't make a choice and say, I think I'll be an atheist. You just are an atheist because you don't believe it. So you're an atheist. And you see things clearly like you haven't before. Suddenly all of the pieces fit, and you're not having to cram those pieces in where they don't. You're not having to make up stories about why there's pieces missing. And you look out at the world, you look at your planet, you look at the universe, and you think, you know what, this looks exactly like one would expect it to if there were no God, and if the claims of Christianity or the other religions are false. Great. The problem is that even though everything is clear up here, down here, and I do realize that your emotions are not in your heart, I'm speaking metaphorically, just to illustrate this. You realize in your emotions that there's conflict here. Whereas when you were a believer, all your emotions were focused. Your faith was focused. You knew what you believed and you were certain of what you were certain of, whether or not there was any evidence to support it. That was a conflict for up here. But here you were sure. You're not sure here anymore. You're sure here, you're not sure here. So you're trying to reconcile this. You're not comfortable with this. You've been trained to believe that if there's something wrong here, that means that God is talking to you and he's telling you that you're off somewhere. You're wrong somewhere. You've gotten off the straight and narrow path. So how do you reconcile that? Thing is, if you go and talk to other people, your pastor, your family, other Christians, they're going to validate that suspicion that that's God. God's telling you you need to come back to him. But the problem with that is, even if you listen to that, you would be right back where you started. You would be trying to make this work at the same time this isn't working. All the confusion is back, and it's even worse now because you've already experienced that moment of clarity that you've never had before. So to suddenly shut the door on that and go back to confusion up here, it's pretty tough to do. So you can't really do that, not with any degree of intellectual integrity. You can't shut that off. So what do you do about this? Well, you have to realize that it's natural, that your emotions are going to be a bit chaotic. I mean, what you're essentially saying is that you've reached a new conclusion, that your parents and your family and your friends and all the people you've gone to church with through your whole life, and those ministers that you hold in high regard, that all these people are wrong. How could that be? How could it be that you're right and that all of those people that you have grown up with are wrong? That the things that your parents taught you growing up were well-intentioned but wrong. That death is really goodbye. That you're not going to be reunited. That your grandparents aren't looking down at you from heaven. They're gone. That there's not going to be any cosmic justice against those who have most earned it. This life is what there is. It's all that we know about. And as far as we know, when it's over, it's just over. No matter how good you are, you're not going to be rewarded any more than the scumbag who is just a leech upon society. We all reach the same end and the same reward. So those things are maybe hard to really accept, but you have to understand the reason why you ever believed them in the first place. It had nothing to do with here. It had everything to do with here. And is this a reliable way to determine what's true. If it's not, then you have to set all those things aside. What you're most interested in right now is integrity, in honesty. You are the thing you are most interested in is what's actually true. You're willing to accept things that are inconvenient. You might not like those things, but you will accept them if they're true. That means that even if God is true and he's a dick, you will accept that. But you got to have evidence first. You're not going to believe based on your feelings. You're not going to believe based on some half-baked worldview of, well, the laws of logic wouldn't make any sense unless there were an intelligence to create them. What you should do is what I did. You should go on YouTube. You want to hear the best arguments from both sides. If there's a reason to believe in this thing you were taught, you want to know what that is. So go watch the debates. Watch the debates between atheists and Christian apologists. There's William Lane Craig, and there's I'm just naming some off the top of my head. There's Kyle Butt. There's wow. I can't even. It's been a while since I've watched Christian Apologist. Evidently, there's what's that one guy's name? Cy Ten Bergencade. There's all these people. There's Ray Comfort. There's a whole lot more than that. Some of these guys I actually like. I don't agree with anything they say, but I like them. Some of them are just douchebags. But, I don't want to plant these ideas in your head. If you are approaching this with honesty, you'll find these things out for yourself. From my experience, I went into watching these debates thinking, my initial impression was, wow, this guy he sounds really smart. He's talking about all this really technical stuff, science, stuff I don't really understand that well. If there's an argument here that this is where I'm going to get it, if the argument exists, this is where I'm going to get it. The atheist guy, on the other hand, he always talked in terms that I could understand. Things that he could say these things, and it's like my mind could immediately grasp these things. The apologist guy, typically, I got dizzy trying to figure out exactly how all this stuff came together. And it occurred to me while I was watching these people that there was something about the apologists' arguments, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. But there was something about them that just didn't quite ring true to me. There was just something missing. There was something that just bothered me. It was like, that sounds good. You say it very well. But it just isn't clicking. And I'm someone who, if it doesn't click, I'm just going to set it aside. What the atheist had to say clicked every time and seemed honest to me. On the apologist side, I just didn't really, it didn't feel honest. What it felt like to me was that they weren't really debating the atheist, but that they were creating these really smart, technical sounding arguments to pander to their audience, to preserve the beliefs of their audience. That if their audience was satisfied to say, that guy, he sounds real smart, he says a whole bunch of smart things, Christianity is not for stupid people, Christianity is for really smart intellectual people, and I'm just going to recite these arguments and not even worry about whether or not I understand them, then I can hang on to my faith. I can be confident in my faith. As someone who really wanted to know what's true and was willing to entertain things that were discomforting, just out of intellectual honesty, that really bothered me. It's like, well, I cannot accept that argument. I'm not the audience that argument was intended for. And neither are you if you are like me and you are approaching this with honesty. But I feel like now that maybe I'm putting too much in your head, that I'm placing too many suggestions there. If watch them, and if you think I'm wrong, just tell me. I'm not infallible. It's possible that I have biases that I'm not conscious of. I suppose it's possible. It may be possible that I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. So watch it for yourself and tell me if you think I'm wrong. I also watched deconversion videos, which was very helpful to me. Finding out that other people were having the same experience that I was, and hearing that experience detailed. Not just that experience, but their whole life growing up in the church. It's amazing. People from such different backgrounds than I was pretty much a fundamentalist, like Pentecostal. But I was hearing stories from Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, all these different religious backgrounds. And they were all having stories that were just like mine. And I was thinking, this is so amazing. Because these people, even though we believed in God, I could not have really gotten along with these people when I was a believer. I could not have had anything really in common with these people, even though we both believed in God, because we came from such different religious backgrounds. But now they're telling such a similar deconversion story as I am, that we can be brothers now, and brothers and sisters. We have this link now, that we've come out of this, and we have essentially the same story to tell. I also watched a lot of the Atheist Experience, which is a call-in show. And they take calls from believers and they deconstruct their arguments, their I have proof of God arguments. And that's a great show. I listened to a podcast called The Bible Geek, Dr. Robert Price. And Dr. Robert Price is a mythicist. In a nutshell, that just means that he believes that Jesus was not an authentic historical figure, that Jesus was an amalgamation of different legendary figures. It's kind of a controversial position, and you don't even have to agree with it. It's nonetheless fascinating, and I learned a lot from Dr. Price. Dr. Price became like my atheist pastor. I can remember working on my house and having Dr. Price's podcast playing, or coming back from spending time with my family who's religious and just kind of feeling low, because feeling like, I'm by myself, I'm an outsider now, and listening to Dr. Price, and Dr. Price, he could just bring me back up and make me feel great again. So there's different things, you don't have to have atheist friends in your life. It's nice, but you don't have to have it. There's plenty of ways to reinforce yourself online. Probably the last thing that I struggled with in terms of losing my faith, and that just goes beyond relationships and all the difficulties with that are really that's not a problem that's solvable, I don't guess. But the last thing that internally sort of bothered me is the notion of hell. And the thought crossed my mind when I lost my belief that what if I'm wrong? If I'm wrong, then I'm going to hell, and there's no way around it. At the same time, I realized that I don't believe this anymore, and I can't make myself believe. And I can't go through the motions, because if God exists and he's really omniscient, then he'd be too smart for me. I mean, he'd be able to see through that. So there was really nothing I could do about hell except for just hope it wasn't real. Nonetheless, the thought of it still bothered me sometimes. And I watched some videos on it of people, deconstructing the notion of hell. And it was good. I liked them. But at the same time, it didn't really penetrate that insecurity that I felt within myself. It's sort of like, this is a problem that I have to work out for myself. And I did. And I think I just realized that no matter what anybody says about me just being an atheist because I want to sin, or there's no such thing as an atheist, that deep down I really believe. No matter what anyone says about me, I know myself, and I know what's in my mind. If anyone can, I do. And I knew that my primary concern was knowing what's true and believing what's true, and not hiding from what's true, and having integrity and honesty. And the thought that in spite of all that I could meet God in the afterlife, realize that I'd made a mistake, and that God would say, well, sorry, pal. Depart from me, for I never knew you. And then toss me into the lake of fire. And then forget that I ever existed, as the Bible says that he will. Just forget about me. Never look in my direction again. I'll be as far from him as east to west. And that I could be tortured for an eternity. Tortured. With God never thinking of me again. The loving God never thinking of me, never casting a glance my way, never remembering and saying, it's been a few million years. I think that guy's probably suffered enough. Let's get him out of there. Let's get him out of the fire, and let's bring him on up here with us. I'm sure by now, he's learned his lesson. Realizing that would never happen, that I was just gone, that I was hopeless, and yet still existing. And I realized that this God is a dick. And this entire concept of hell, it's not something that a loving God would create and send people to. When you imagine all of the options that an omnipotent God has, he could just blink you out of existence. He could just let you die like an animal. He could even kill you. He could just strike you dead, cause you to have a heart attack or a brain aneurysm. But instead of that, he says, no, I think what we'll do is we'll take all of these people, the majority of the people who have ever existed, and we'll throw them into this pit where they'll burn for eternity while the rest of us are up partying in heaven. That makes a lot of sense. No, it doesn't make any sense. It's not something that a loving God would do. It's just absurd. And when I really realized how absurd it was, I just had to laugh. And if it happens that this is true, if it happens that in despite of my mockery and my laughter, that all of the Christian claims about hell are true, then there's nothing I can do about it. The fact is, God's still a dick. I'm better than that God. And I am too good for his heaven. Hell is perhaps where I would belong, with all the other people who refuse to worship that dick. Of course, I'm being facetious now because I don't believe that God exists. He's a creation of human beings. I can't say I'm certain, but I think I have a pretty good reason to believe that that's true. He's a creation of humans. Humans invented all this. If that were not the case, it would make a lot more sense than it does. And we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So I'm going to cut that off here. It's much longer than I thought it would be. Hopefully something that I've said may be helpful to you. And I would appreciate your comments. Subscribe. I'm on Facebook as Adam Blackstar, Twitter, Adam Blackstar. So look me up. Let me know what you want to talk about in future videos. And best wishes to you. Let me know if I can help.